The gloves are off between Mukesh, Ambani and Sunil. Bharti Mittal in the high-profile 4G war. Mittal today fired the first shot in a battle of money, muscle and egos with his flagship Bharti Airtel launching pan-India 4G services. Bharti has effectively gained the first-mover advantage ahead of the much-awaited 4G rollout by Reliance Jio. That's, of course, later this year.
And with the fight clearly shifting from voice to data, Airtel is offering 4G services at 3G rates to keep its subscriber base intact. But despite the Big Bang rollout, consumers are not celebrating just yet. For one, despite the tall talk of 3G, the quality of mobile services remains abysmally poor, with call drops and weak data streaming becoming the order of the day. So will 4G be any different? And what's in it for mobile subscribers? That's our top story on Business Tonight.
The stage is set for the mother of all battles in Indian telecom, even as Mukesh Ambani is fine-tuning his strategy to roll out Reliance Jio's 4G services. Sunil Mittal's Bharti Airtel took the lead to get the first-mover advantage, rolling out its pan-India 4G services. It's a grand plan which will cover 297 cities in the next few weeks. Airtel will offer 4G to consumers at 3G rates, with data packs starting as low as 25 rupees. It's a range of infinity plans offer unlimited calls with data. Customers will get 4G SIM cards in just 4 hours. A move that will allow the telco to tap the high ARPU customer ahead of Reliance Jio's mega launch. Data is the next growth frontier for telcos. Data contribution to revenues have grown from 9% to 20% in 2 years, and 4G could mean even higher growth trajectory. But the big gap in 4G continues to be the handsets. While Bharti has tied up with Samsung and Flipkart, Reliance Jio is also working overtime to bring cost of smartphones down ahead of its launch, which is expected by the end of this year. As the battle shifts to 4G, customer will be the big gainer, as companies will go all out to woo high-value customers. Priya Singh with Gaurav Dwivedi, ET Now, New Delhi.
Okay, on Business Tonight, we are debating the advent of 4G technology. Call drops on the rise. You're stuck with poor 3G networks. Is India really 4G ready? Are we ready for 4th generation data services, or is this just lip service by telecom operators? We've got Rajan Mathews, Director General of the Cellular Operators Association of India, and Sanjay Kapoor, Chairman of Micromax, as well, joining in on that big debate this evening. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us on the show. I'm going to start with you, Sanjay. You know, customers today are stuck with poor voice services, patchy data services on 3G. Do you believe the 4G promise is just that, just an empty promise?
Well, it's a promise which cannot be lived only on the spectrum that has been won by operators today, which is 2.3 gigahertz and 1.8 gigahertz. And it cannot be delivered till the indoor experience is set right. And other than this, very clearly, like 3G is not a contiguous experience. It's not a real mobile experience. I think to have a real mobile experience on 4G is going to take enormous amount of investment, and I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow. I think operators will really have to work hard based on consumer experience to provide a complete contiguous mobile experience to their customers. I think initially it will be sporadic and nomadic, no matter how hard they try, and to become a completely mobile experience on 4G, I think is a little while away.
Mr. Mathews, what would you say to that? Mr. Kapoor seems to think it's going to be sporadic and nomadic. And honestly, as a consumer, you know, 2G, 3G, 4G, it's all an alphabet soup really for me. I'm not convinced at all.
No, I think, Taneia, you're right. The customer is really going to be focusing on the customer experience. But one thing we do know is that when we look at our network statistics, 80% of mobile use, both for data and voice, predominantly comes from a fixed location. So I think Sanjay is right in terms of saying we have to look at offloading Wi-Fi indoor coverage, and so that's going to, in the long term, help with the coverage issue as well as the quality issue. But let me just put the quality issue into context. You know, we are one of the few countries where we have multiplicity of these 2G, 3G, 4G. Most countries have moved on from 2G to 3G or from a combination of 3G, 4G. So we're at the cusp, the leading cusp, if you will, of some of this implementation. So we should expect a few burps along the way. But I think in the long term, this is going to be absolutely fantastic for the customer and also for the nation.
Okay, so good for you if you're in it for the long haul, says Mr. Mathews. But Sanjay, just wondering, is infrastructure really the big, bone of contention? Because many would argue that operators haven't invested in infrastructure, and that to a large extent is the reason why the quality of service is so poor.
If we go to United States of America, where almost every household, every commercial building is wired, there is hundreds of megs of spectrum available to top operators in that country. There is 2G, there is 3G, and now 4G. And there is enough Wi-Fi available as well. And despite of all this, if you look at AT&T, if you look at Verizon, and look at their capex expenditure each year, despite of a very developed network, it's all between $15 billion and $25 billion every year. If you put all Indian operators together and see what sort of an expenditure they are incurring, it is some $6–7 billion a year. Obviously, it's far, far too small. Go to China, which spends almost $50 billion a year. The speed at which they've really built up a 4G network at China Mobile, putting virtually 1 million towers in a very small time, just tells you the magnitude of investments that these guys have committed to build a great customer experience. I think Indian operators, given the plight of their balance sheets and their P&Ls, have really been falling short of what can really make a world-class consumer experience on their investments.
Rajan, comment on that. The point that Sanjay is making, that Indian operators across the board aren't making the kind of investments that they need to ensure good consumer experience, whether it's 2G, whether it's 3G, or now even 4G. The fact that they're constrained by, by their balance sheet, or, by keeping an eye on their profitability margins, which is why they aren't really investing in building those networks. How would you respond to that?
So if you look at what is being spent, I think, Sanjay's got the numbers right. I think we spend about, 9 to 10 billion previously. That sort of came down in the last couple of years because of various constraints. It's picking back up, so about 8 or so, billion US dollars is what we are pumping into our networks. Is that enough? I think, we need to begin to start looking at more investments, and that will happen. But I think one of the bigger constraints that we are facing, certainly in terms of the customer-facing experience, which is what we call the radio access network piece, I think the biggest constraint there is not necessarily the investments we're making. I think we all stand ready to make the investments in the cell towers and related infrastructure. The problems we run into is constraints at the local jurisdiction level, where we can't get towers put on air fast enough. And contrary to our efforts, many jurisdictions are actually pulling down towers because of issues around permission granting for levies on fees and trying to extract those types of monies from the industry. I think that's one of the larger areas that we face as challenge in terms of the customer experience,
sure,
the drop calls, and the ability to be able to give that quality experience to the consumer.
That's actually a separate debate in itself. But Sanjay, I want to bring you in on spectrum crunch as well, because very often this is an excuse that gets thrown at consumers as well. The fact that Indian operators get far less spectrum than there should be, that there is this artificial scarcity that's been created by the government for whatever reasons, and is not, whether it's 3G, whether it's 2G, it hasn't really given adequate spectrum to the operators. Is that a genuine constraint according to you?
Undoubtedly. Having been on that side of business for a very long part of my life, professional life, I can say that this is a very spectrum-hungry industry and business. And if you do not have the right bands and the right quantum of spectrum available, you cannot deliver results that can be compared with the best in the world. So India is in a particular dilemma at the moment, and I don't believe that dilemma is going to result into more spectrum coming at lesser price in the market in a hurry. That's not going to happen. It doesn't look to be on the anvil. But if that is true, I think least the government at this stage and the policymakers at this stage can begin to do is to start allowing operators to share and trade spectrum very freely amongst themselves, because we all know that larger chunks of spectrum can produce more than smaller chunks of spectrum, and at least allow that to happen. And it is not for an operator, it is not for an industry, but for the cause of a consumer experience. There are businesses that depend on bandwidth today, and especially a country like ours, which lacks a physical infrastructure comparison with the developed world. We cannot deprive our business people and our citizens of a digital infrastructure that augurs well and compares well with the rest of the world. And I think we need to have very liberal policies, and we'll have to really take some bold decisions to make that happen. And I hope that comes across. In the long run, of course, there is no shying away from putting together all the available spectrum and good quality of spectrum other than the quantity to all operators at affordable prices so that we can be competitive with the rest of the world.
Mr. Mathews, would you say that, we as a country are 4G ready? And I mean more here in terms of an ecosystem, whether it's handsets, apps, contents.
Taneia, I think we are getting there. Certainly the price points at which we expect the smartphone to be kind of a mass market appeal instrument is probably sometime around the 5,000 rupee range. We're close. We're at about 6,000, and I think it's rapidly coming down. But I think a function of that price point is the quantum of demand, and I think that's one of the areas where more of our 4G networks rolling out. So whether Reliance comes in or Idea comes in, it's really going to enhance the market because the demand increases, and in telephony, scale is absolutely critical. So as the demand increases, those price points, because of the volume, will come to the point where it becomes a mass market instrument. So I think that is absolutely critical going forward. Now, just to sort of give you a benchmark in terms of what Sanjay was talking about in spectrum, in the rest of the world, there are at least 5 networks on which data demand is distributed. You have your landline, which in the rest of the world is very heavily penetrated. You have a satellite network, which also has high penetration. You have a cable network, which also has, fiber to most houses. You have a government sort of a network which is very secure, and then of course you have the mobile network. 5 networks. In India, we are single-threaded. We have one network in which all of the data comes through. Put that into the context in terms of the relative spectrum that we have. Globally, most operators have at least 45 to 50 megahertz in spite of the fact of 5 available networks. In India, the average to the operator is at a measly 12 to 15 megahertz.
Right,
so you can see
Mr.
the challenge around spectrum.
Mr. Mathews, I absolutely appreciate the point you're making, and there's just so much to talk about, right? But we promised our viewers that the center of this discussion really would be what is in it for them. And so, Mr. Kapoor, I'll let you have the last word. From a consumer point of view, do you believe 4G is a game changer or a washout?
I think to begin with, it's not going to be a complete mobile experience is how I look at it. And I hope that I'm proven wrong by the operators who are launching 4G. But it will evolve. Like 3G evolved, I think 4G will evolve. The whole 4G ecosystem to really become completely mobile, contiguous, indoor, I think is a game that will really pan out over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
3, 4, 5 years, hopefully we'll get there. Sanjay and Rajan, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us on that big debate right here on Business Tonight.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.